My name is Nefertari Strickland. I'm founder of Teachers and a Benefit LLC, where we believe that Pennsylvania industry deserves a world-class Pennsylvania educated workforce. It's Philly Tech Week 2021, and we've had some amazing discussions today. This session is NeoTechs, from the HeLa cell to K-12 education. So I'd like to welcome our panelists, Dr. Olivier Noel, founder of DNA Simple, Dr. Juliana Cavallo, co-founder of OneSkin topical supplement, and the director of STEM Workforce Partnerships at the University City Science Center, Phil Brooks. So if you missed the earlier sessions, we highly encourage that you rewatch them when you have an opportunity. In the earlier session, there was a lot of discussion around bioethics, which ties into our session right now. Maria Chavez, the president of BioCurious, a company that pairs graduate students with startups, describes cell and gene therapy as overlapping fields that treat, prevent, and cure disease. She walked us through a timeline of the technology that started around the 1970s to present. So I have a slide that I'd like to show you. It's going to walk you through the same timeline, but putting cell and gene therapy into perspective using the 4 industrial revolutions. So earlier during that cell and gene therapy 101 session, those bio concerns involve what I would say, or how I want to bring it into the conversation with Henrietta Lacks. I think it's really important to take a historical perspective, to put it in context, looking at the first industrial revolution as mechanized. We have steam power, then moving into the second, third, and now fourth industrial revolution, where we're asking ourselves questions about what's ethical with regard to technology. So the first slide is a security alert. Okay, again, 1700s, steam power technology, 1800s, looking at getting electricity into homes and in businesses as the second industrial revolution. And then the third industrial revolution is where most of us get excited about technology, so computing. And then the fourth industrial revolution, where we have smart technology, smart cities, cyber physical systems, embedded computing systems is what we consider today. So on the next slide, a more detailed timeline. So I'd like to look and focus on the third industrial technological revolution, where the story of Henrietta Lacks enters the conversation in between the second and third. So helping us put this into context, there is a video that helps you understand this moment in history. If you're not already familiar, if you are familiar, I'm sure you'll have appreciation for what's being shared. So go ahead and play that, please.
At the center of the Henrietta Lacks story are people asking questions. For people trying to understand the biology of human cells, it's there. For bioethicists, for patients. This is why Johns Hopkins is committed to outreach and education for all the community.
It's a labor of love. We all feel like we're connected to this beautiful woman who we call the mother of medicine. It really makes you think about how powerful an impact one person unknowingly could make.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming to learn more about my great-grandmother and what her legacy has left for all of us here today. So over 60 years ago,
in my capacity as the Director of Outreach for the Institute for Clinical and Translational Research, I organize educational programs related to Henrietta Lacks. And the main focus is to increase awareness of Henrietta Lacks' impact on medicine and society, to gain a better understanding of the science behind HeLa cells, and also to create an open dialogue about the social issues that were occurring around the time in which Henrietta Lacks' cells were cultured.
I would say that Henrietta is probably, if not the most important, certainly one of the most important women in science and medicine. And we all learn and follow Henrietta Lacks' legacy as we contribute to research and medicine.
Henrietta Lacks was a 31-year-old woman admitted to Johns Hopkins in 1951 for the diagnosis and treatment of cervical cancer. Unfortunately, she had a very aggressive cancer, and within a year, she had died. As part of the care she received at Johns Hopkins, the cells from her cervix were brought into a laboratory and cultured and have become the first human living cell line, which has allowed us to learn remarkable things about how human cells function.
It was really, in my opinion, the launch pad, probably the greatest discovery in biomedical research in the last half of the 20th century. It has led to numerous discoveries and development of technologies.
It provided the ability for us to understand how cells grow, how cells divide, whether cells can survive in extreme climates, going into outer space, how radiation damages cells, how we can produce lots of material to make things like vaccines, which is all part of what the HeLa cell has done for science and for the public.
Just the fact that, 65 years later, a sample of our grandmother's cells still exists out in the world today is almost superhuman.
Our responsibility is to honor the legacy of Henrietta, to thank her family, and thank her posthumously each year, which is what we do. We have a Henrietta Lacks memorial lecture. I think last year we had 1,000 people attend. Each year we organize the Henrietta Lacks High School Symposium. We've partnered with the Henrietta Lacks Legacy Group, the Turner Station Conservation Teams, and other groups to form a book club that builds a bridge for people who live in this community and Hopkins researchers to get together and really talk about issues. We also have the Microscope Day, in which we open up the laboratory of one of our colleagues, Jim Potter. They learn about the significance of her cells. The Johns Hopkins Urban Health Institute offers a $15,000 partnership grant to community-based organizations that partner with Johns Hopkins researchers to address health challenges that are impacting people who live in Baltimore. We also partner with Dunbar High School to offer the Henrietta Lacks Scholarship for individuals who are interested in pursuing careers in medicine. And that is really, to us, one of the ultimate ways of honoring Henrietta Lacks is to increase the prevalence of individuals working in medicine who understand the unique challenges of the community.
This scholarship is way more than just academics, is me being a part of a legacy. It shows you that Henrietta Lacks her cells did more than help cure diseases. Her sacrifice has given teenagers like me an opportunity to excel in their future.
The students are the next generation. They're the next generation of doctors, researchers, scientists. So to get them exposed to the story of Henrietta Lacks and see the mistakes that were made and how we are moving forward, possibilities are endless.
What was most interesting to me was what the providers were saying.
Collaboration between the community and academics is what medicine is supposed to be. We're not supposed to be an ivory tower. We are supposed to be working with the people we serve. And by reaching out to the community, we better understand them, their needs, and they understand what it takes for us.
At some point in some time in life, everybody's gonna get sick. Everybody's gonna suffer from some type of disease, some type of cancer, some type of dementia, any type of thing. So we need research to, find cures, find medication, and find some kind of prevention. So I think it's very important research, and I think, we need to do our part to get involved.
So again, I want to say thank you for helping us honor my great-grandmother Henrietta Lacks, in which
Henrietta passed away, but yet she still lives on, and she's making a huge impact on society today.
Thank you. So I thought it was really important to set the stage, to put this in context. Why are we bringing up Henrietta Lacks and the HeLa cells? Why are we talking about COVID-19 and colors of COVID in this conversation? And I think it's really important to bring it back to the human aspect and how these cutting edge fourth industrial revolution technologies impact us as people. So Tiara, I'd like you to share with us your motivation, your why with Colors of COVID, and your work in context.
Absolutely. And thank you again, Nefertari, for giving me a chance to share a little bit about my story. So, as Nefertari mentioned, colorsofcovid.org is really about sharing the stories of other people of color and communities of color and the experiences that they've had with COVID-19, whether they had it themselves or whether they were impacted by it because of someone else in their family or their friends. So I never actually get the opportunity to share my story. So last year, around the April timeframe, just shortly after the kind of national shutdown, my partner and I began to experience symptoms similar to what they were describing on TV as COVID. But even though the symptoms were the same, they weren't necessarily the leading symptoms that would signal that we needed to go to the hospital. So I'll just start with my story. I didn't have a fever. I didn't have a cough. I didn't have any breathing challenges. I experienced extreme fatigue. And I can't even describe the level of fatigue that I had. But I really, in my mind, it didn't resonate as to why I was having the level of fatigue. It was only after my partner began to experience symptoms that we started to think, this could be COVID, but none of the information on our, when we looked at US news, whether it was through the internet, through evidence-based literature in the US, none of it actually said, if these things are happening to you, you could still possibly have COVID. And so through research of our own, a lot of international research, out of Europe, and through conversations that we had with personal contacts with physicians, we just decided ourselves that we had COVID. And at that point, we knew we had to take some pretty rigorous steps to try to keep ourselves safe and to keep ourselves healthy because, the doctors were saying, don't come to the hospital. The bottom line is through this experience, we experienced a huge level of frustration. And it went from frustration to anger. And so after we were healthy enough, which really took about 90 days, which was again, not consistent with the news that we heard, we knew that we had to do something. And so we started colorsofcovid.org, which was really a place for not only people to share their stories, but also a place for us to be able to curate evidence-based information and share it with our community and with our friends. And so in addition to that, I've launched a speaker series that really focuses on how COVID-19 has impacted Philadelphia residents, and Venture Cafe has allowed me to leverage their platform for that experience.
Thank you for that explanation. At any time, if you all have a comment or if you have a question, please feel free to use the chat. I feel as though what we're all experiencing with this pandemic is our challenge of the day to come through together. And so I'd like to introduce you to the remaining panelists. And Tiara, please stay with us. Juliana Cavallo, PhD, earned her master's degree in biochemistry and immunology and her PhD in molecular biology from the Federal University in Brazil. She's a professor of pathology who guides the newest scientists who are pursuing their master's and PhD's degrees in the sciences. Juliana is the co-inventor of 4 patents and has published 34 peer-reviewed papers and counting. She is also the co-founder of OneSkin. Dr. Cavallo, welcome.
Thank you very much, Nefertiti. It's a pleasure to be here. So it was a great video that you shared, and let me know what do you expect to hear from myself exactly?
Well, I think for a major part of this is for educators, is for teachers who are preparing students to enter the cell and gene therapy space, as well as other innovative fourth industrial revolution technologies. So I'd like to ask you, if you could talk to Juliana in high school, what would you tell yourself about being prepared for your career?
Yes, well, that's a very tough question if you come to realize so many things I could have told myself. And I used to be so much more shy at the time when I was younger. And sometimes I was really resistant to really getting involved in some of the learning experience that I had in high school. And if I could talk to myself in those years, I would tell myself to never miss a single opportunity to participate in different activities, but really getting involved, and never miss an opportunity to speak for myself. Those learnings came with time, and I came to realize how much we can turn an experience that will not change your life to an experience that will completely change your life just by getting involved. And of course, as a professor, I also try to make all the efforts possible to inspire and to touch my students, so they can also realize that by getting involved, by really dedicating themselves to the activities they propose themselves to do, they will reach higher standards and they will have greater achievements.
Beautiful. So for us here in the US, the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact is not unique to us. This is a global experience. So thank you for being a part of this conversation. I'd like to now introduce you all to Olivier Noel, PhD. He's an entrepreneur, 2017 Forbes 30 Under 30, and a scientist. He's an incoming plastic and reconstructive surgery resident at Yale and is currently pursuing his MD PhD at the Pennsylvania State College of Medicine, connecting genetic researchers and their donors. He's the founder of DNA Simple, and he believes that scientists, clinicians, and trainees should collaborate. Dr. Noel, welcome.
Thank you, Nefertari, for the intro and for the invitation.
Absolutely.
I guess I'll go along the question that Dr. Cavallo tried to answer. It's obviously a tough question. I think in the context here, I think two things that I would tell myself is from the research standpoint, it's continue learning and continue working hard. And I think a lot of times what we work in the lab is not obvious what the clinical implication can be. And case in point for some of the mRNA work that a lot of the folks were doing, and in the vaccine context, now everyone kind of gets a grasp of what that means. So I think continue working hard and enjoying whatever research project that is. I think from a second point, a little more global, would be work at sort of bridging the gap between scientists and the general population. I think it can a little bit relate to the first point I made. A lot of the things that we work at don't make it out to the public until it's a big story or it's in science or the ultimate clinical implication is obvious to everyone. So I think it's, we do get taxpayers' money and we do in work and oftentimes I think people don't know about that. So I think that's one of the things I would have done a little more and I continue to do as I do research here now. It's to reach out to folks in the community and in high schools and colleges and share some of the works that we do on the more cutting edge. And that gets them excited and that gets folks a better idea about what we do and why science and is important.
Very good. And I just got a direct message in the chat. Someone said you look familiar. They asked me if you were on television.
I was. They're probably talking about Shark Tank.
Yeah. So did that experience, or I guess this is a leading question,
Sure.
How did that experience in terms of representation, you being on television and sharing your journey and your accolades, what type of response have you gotten?
Sure. I mean, I think it was a few years back and I probably still have messages to respond to. I think that tells you a little bit about the impact the inbox saw first. It's for us, I think there were a lot of unique stuff. It's being an MD PhD on there. It's not often that you see that the science folks getting into the business area, being a minority in business and medicine and research also jumps out to folks. And I think the mission of what we had and set out to do also resonated with folks. So just to put in context, DNA Simple is a startup that I created while getting my PhD, and the idea was to connect patients to research labs for sample acquisition. And the idea was that we're trying to get a portion of the population that traditionally has not been involved in clinical trials and research to get involved and sort of eliminate the physical barrier of having to go to an institution that's close by to provide whatever specimen that could help to a research project. And so I think folks like that. It resonated with them. And so I think it was a great platform that allowed me to sort of put DNA Simple forward and also what we were working on. So I think there may be different reasons. So eventually I'll get to all my messages.
Very good. So I want to go back to Dr. Carvalho because she didn't get an opportunity to share about OneSkin, which I am recently a customer of OneSkin. I absolutely love this product. And when I found out about it, I thought it was a great way to engage girls and women about STEM in education, as well as the technologies that are being used right now. So Dr. Cavallo, will you share what OneSkin is and a little bit to help people understand in context?
Of course, it will be a pleasure. And thanks, Angela, for sharing the link to the OneSkin website. So OneSkin is a biotechnology startup that was founded by 4 Brazilian female PhDs back in 2015. And that tells a little bit about how high quality education can take you anywhere, right? The company is located in San Francisco, California. But at this time I'm in Brazil, working from distance. And the company's purpose is to extend the healthy years in people's lives. And we began to promote this by developing the first topical supplement to the skin. And it was created specifically to fight aged cells that have been characterized as a central part of the skin dysfunction, age-related dysfunction. So importantly, the skin has been largely overlooked in regards to its influence to the overall health. So when we started to think about longevity, we really saw an empty space for the skin, and we decided to really promote skin health. And by doing that, you promote organismal health and you extend the healthy years of people's lives. We have developed very strong scientific rationale as longevity science. We have developed a very interesting technology platform that involves cells and tissue engineering. And we create aged skin samples in the lab, and we use those to develop new products. And it is really awesome to see OneSkin as the first company to commercialize a product that treats senescent cells or aged cells. This is the first, and it came from where people wouldn't expect it to come. So this is a little bit about OneSkin. Of course, if you access the website, you will know a lot more about all the science, all the technology, everything that is going on in the company.
And I'll share the website is amazing. And we'd like to share Dr. Noel's website in the chat as well. So introducing our final panelist, Phil Brooks. Many of you are familiar with Phil. He joined the education-based AmeriCorps program City Year in Philadelphia, where he served as a senior program manager and has led over 200 18 to 14-year-old young adults in full-time volunteer service. After a 10-year commitment to City Year, he joined the Mayor's Office of Education as a program manager of STEM initiatives. Later, his work transitioned to the Commerce Department's Talent Development Unit and the Office of Workforce Development, where he oversaw the City of Philadelphia's citywide STEM initiative that engaged, connected, and convened citizens in the region. So currently, Phil is the Director of STEM Workforce Partnerships for the University City Science Center. Phil, welcome.
Thank you, Nefertari. Great introduction. Good evening, everyone. It's always a pleasure to hop on a Venture Cafe platform to talk really just a little bit about what I consider a passion of mine, which is connecting, exposing, and making sure our future scientists, our future researchers, our future STEM students have the proper connections and proper tools to really be the best that they can be. My current work really focuses on connecting adults to life science opportunities in a variety of different ways. If you've been on some of the other conversations earlier in this evening, we heard from a moderator, Melinda Blees, and she oversees the work that they do at biolabs. Having conversations with them has been really, really great. One, not only just for our program, but thinking of ways to connect it with students, connect it with adults. Wouldn't it be a really interesting situation in a home where a student is going to school, they're learning about science, and their parent or guardian or aunt or uncle are also learning about science, really closing that loop where that student and that parent can learn together and be better for it. So really, really excited to engage in more of the conversation, really excited to hear from the other panelists. They're amazing. You guys, I will research you guys a little bit more and send you emails. You guys sound fantastic.
Well, Dr. Noel, it'll take him a while to get to it, so. So, Phil, I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball to get straight to the point. Not so much what you would tell yourself as a high school student, but wanting to talk directly to the educators and the administrators that are in control of the curriculum and instruction for the future workforce of what we've labeled Silicon Valley, right? What would you say to them about what they could put in place now, what relationships to help prepare this future workforce?
Yeah, so a number of things come to mind immediately. Even if I had to talk to my past self, that would be one thing. But to talk to, and I would say more particularly my 10th grade science teacher, Mr. Farron, I would really say to provide students with opportunities to test out ideas or test out theories or be really encouraging to those shy students who may have a brilliant idea, but because of other students in the class or personalities or bullying or whatever, aren't able to speak up and talk a little bit more about what they're thinking. That cure for cancer can be in the back of an 8th grader's brain, but because of all of the things I just mentioned, it's not coming out, it's not being nurtured. So in my mind, science fairs, science fairs, science fairs. And on top of that, science fairs that connect other students together, not just within the region, but across the country, and more on top of that, internationally. I've had opportunities to join science fairs that were internationally, unfortunately, not as a young person, but I saw the beauty of having an international science fair or a local science fair or a nationwide science fair as something that students could really connect. So if I were to tell any of the teachers growing up, specifically where I grew up, science fairs and just encouraging those students who don't speak too much to just speak and share what they're thinking. I was one of those students who didn't say much, but encouragement and opportunities is where I'd go for that question.
That's great. And science fairs, right?
And lots of them, more of them. Let's go.
So with Dr. Cavallo and Dr. Noel, I'd like to know what would be the best use of your time? Because obviously you're in the lab, you're speaking at conferences, even if virtually, you're writing papers, co-authoring papers. What is the best use of your time engaging with learners, K through 12 learners? How could we best tap into you? Dr. Noel?
Sure, yeah. Another tough question, but really important one. I mean, for me, I love giving back, and that's one of the avenues that I try to do it. My wife is actually a teacher as well, so I try to come to her class, and one of the some science fairs, I'm always there too. So that hit home a little bit. But I think, I mean, frankly, I mean, time is obviously tough for us, but I think having a continuity type of program with students, whether select students or students that would like to go into the field that we are in. Let's say students who are interested in going to medical school or interested in getting a PhD or interested in incorporating science in entrepreneurship. So I think those would be great students to be able to link up with us. We may not be able to locate them because we don't work with them all the time. We don't necessarily have the time to go and reach out to them. but we'd love to give back if the opportunity arises. So I think from a teacher standpoint who knows the student, can identify 10, 15, 20 students who are interested in that path, connecting it with us and sort of have the continuity is going to be more important. I think one-day events can be very impactful in terms of lighting up the fire and letting you get interested into a topic and you get to research afterwards. But I think continuity and having that multiple contact point with someone who wants to emulate you or wants to do something that you're interested in makes for a bigger impact. So I think that's where a realistic path, I think, identifying key students that are interested in the field and then reaching out to folks like us to be mentors over a long period of time in sort of nurturing those students, I think would be an impactful way.
I think that's a great idea. And there's a lot of push and support for project-based learning. So I could even see those key students being the leaders of projects and bringing the other students along that have strengths in their own areas. So Dr. Cavallo, same question for you. How can we best make use of access to you and your time with our K-12 students?
Yes, I also believe that bringing scientific knowledge or scientific thinking to the schools is, of course, positive. Incentivizing students to identify questions to which they resonate with and to make a step further and to establish a hypothesis and then propose an experiment to test that hypothesis is a very positive way of us scientists to bring this way of thinking to students. There's no dumb question. There's no not interesting question. If it's something you're interested about, if you're able to establish hypotheses and tests and so forth, this is a very interesting way that scientists can contribute to student learning. Here in Brazil, there is a very strong role of universities acting in low-income communities. So we frequently visit schools that are nearby, and we always try to incentivize students to tell them that they are able to join us at the university. They are able to become whatever they want to become, but but those contacts are very short, and we try to inspire people. But at the same time, I think that much more could be done. As Dr. Noel and Phil, they mentioned, there's a lot more to be done, and it's a challenge because we are overwhelmed with so many different activities. But at the same time, if we don't extrapolate from the university ground, from the company ground, we will limit a lot the impact we can exert to other people. And I feel that is still a gap in scientific communication with society, and we need to dedicate ourselves to communicate more.
I agree. And we've had many conversations here at Venture Cafe and how to bridge those gaps in communication, whether it be industry, that startup space, K-12 education, higher education. There are a lot of gaps, but there is definitely a group of interested stakeholders that want to bridge them. So in the chat, Tracy, our friend Tracy Brala with Venture Cafe and the University City Science Center, said she was afraid of science fairs, which is Phil's thing, right? So Tracy, I'd like to engage you in conversation, Phil as well, because I know that there's an effort to grow us as a region, but K-12 education and the focus that I've seen from the 4 counties that hug Philadelphia, Bucks, Chester, Delaware, and Montgomery, and then what is happening in Philadelphia proper seems to be a bit separate. So we look at the wet labs that are in CIC, and we look at what's happening out in Upper Marion at the Discovery Center, and there seems to be an opportunity for bridging. So what are your thoughts in how I can, and the individuals like Dr. Cavallo and Noel that I bring into this space, how can we help bridge communication? Tracy or Phil?
Phil, do you want to go?
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. What? Okay, great. So I have a number of thoughts, and Nefertari, you and I have had lots of conversations about this in depth. So when folks hear science fairs, they think of the traditional science fairs. They think of beakers and microscopes and things of that nature. But that term has really evolved into a lot of what you were talking about with the fourth industrial revolution with technology. There's fairs that focus on robotics. There's fairs that focus on drone technology. There's fairs that focus on cybersecurity. There's fairs that focus on engineering. There's fairs that focus on healthcare. And I think a lot of these fairs are very underrepresented in, that term science fair. So part of, I think, what the communication could be is, a lot of these students, as they get more exposure, as, individuals come in from industry, as doctors come in, to the surrounding schools, they'll start to understand, or at least the hope is that they'll start to understand that there's more to just a science fair than just the traditional thought process. So as that communication evolves, as students start to hear a little bit more about that, to be honest, that'll have kind of like a domino effect. And because our young people are on every type of social media, they hear one thing, they tell their friend tells two other people, those two people tell four people. And that really is a really good way. It might not be the traditional way, but it's a really good way of communication as it relates to near peer communication. When they think something is cool, everybody thinks something is cool. And this helps kind of bridge that communication gap. So I have way more to say on that, but I'll stop right there.
And I would comment, I think one of the panelists did share. And so I think when I was in the science fair genre just a couple of years ago, it was definitely like the individual kid who was doing and being required to come up with the idea and present the presentation and kind of soup to nuts. And so what I think is really incredibly powerful is this idea of leveraging the skills of teammates. And so while, and this is something that I've just been incredibly impressed with the firsthand program that we have at the Science Center, where you see that there is maybe one kid who is terrific with science. All the kids are exposed to science, but they're terrific with science. But yet then there's this other person who in life is going to be a salesperson. And this, other person is really creative. And so they're adding a musical element to the presentation that the kids are doing. And so for me, that those types of experiences, which I didn't necessarily feel like I experienced when I was growing up, have been incredibly powerful. And, like I said, I've been impressed with the program that the firsthand team at the Science Center created. And I think it's a really great model because it does bring the kids who are in schools, most of the schools are in West Philadelphia, to the Science Center, to kind of a lab environment. They see folks in lab coats next door. They talk to those folks as mentors, so that they're learning from, people who they may or may not aspire to be, but they now know and have exposure to the work that they're doing.
And I think those are great opportunities. And, we don't have to go as far as to have a sister city when we have just counties out in the suburbs that could mirror, that model. Again, with the Discovery Center here with schools like Upper Merion, right? So looking at what uniquely makes you who you are, Dr. Noel. I know you're a Penn Stater, right? We are. And Dr. Cavallo, being Brazilian, speaking Portuguese, we have a population in our area that would gravitate to those opportunities. So what is it, Dr. Noel, that you saw when you were here before going off to Connecticut? What did you see here that was an opportunity for us in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to help bridge the communication in this space?
I actually lived in Philadelphia and then Hershey. So I've done 4 years in Philly, 4 years in Hershey, so I say college. So I've been able to see a bit of the same. I mean, a little different there. I think Hershey's concentrated. The opportunities are there, but it favors students that are really going for it. So it favors somebody who's who already knows they want to do, want to go into science, want to go another things and opportunities there to go and get it. Philadelphia, I mean, you know better than me, was a little more heterogeneous. Some pockets, I mean, the opportunities are there. I mean, if you want to do science, even as a high schooler, there's Penn there, there's so many other opportunities to get into it. And so I think it's a little more heterogeneous. I think some pockets have more than others. But in terms of opportunities themselves, I think you could rival Boston, New York, and other places. I mean, frankly, you've got a number of universities, a number of, and I'm talking academia of that level. I'm not too familiar with the K-12 landscape as much as the academia universities, but I think opportunity-wise, there is just as terrific, as abundant as any other city, frankly. And so I think in terms of bridges and stuff you're talking about, opportunities are endless here. If we could identify the right folks, right partners to be able to get involved, I think that could be really be the key. I think some places have the will and they don't have the resources. Philly has all the resources that you need. I think structuring in programs and bridging to be able to use those resources, the keys, it's a lot of cities would be quite envied of these opportunities, I would say.
I agree. I'm not originally from this region, and it just blows my mind, the opportunities in higher education. I was going to 3675 just the other day, and they've got these blocks with quotes like from the women of ENIAC and Buckminster Fuller, and I'm just mind blown every time that I see these dots that are ready to be connected. Right?
Certainly.
Part of the base in our region that is primed to be served are those that speak English as a second language. And like I brought up with Dr. Cavallo, have you seen opportunities with English language learners to integrate STEM, or can you think of a good way that we could integrate STEM with language?
Yes, I definitely see great opportunities there. There are some, actually here in Brazil, there are some English schools that bring STEM and bring technology to the methods, and sometimes they rely on way more innovative and creative ways of teaching compared to regular schools. And of course, there are huge possibilities there. And when you come to think about science, English is the official language of communication. Even though for each small country having literature, scientific literature written in the mother language of the country is important to guarantee access to a lot of people regarding the information that is generated. But if you think about international scientific communication, you need to speak and to write in English. So those themes, the STEM careers or the STEM incentives and the English, they should really be connected, because there's no way of being a great scientist without the ability to communicate in English.
Understood. So I want to bring it back to cell and gene therapy proper, right? Where have you seen or read about it being used, and what are your predictions about the use of cell and gene therapy technology?
Well, I have worked with cell therapy for a long time in my life, and I have also co-founded another startup company that was focused on cell therapy, but it didn't, well, we closed the company after some time. The legislation here in Brazil is quite complicated, and only this year Brazil has finished the regulatory framework for cell and gene therapy. So at this year, Brazil has started to approved commercial products. So I have breathed cell therapy for a long time. So I have seen a lot of basic and translational science being done in the theme. A little bit, I have less experience with gene therapy, but it can be combined with cell therapy. Instead of making a genetic modification in the patient, you can genetically modify a group of cells and then bring those genetically edited cells to the patient. But recently in Brazil, I have seen a lot of expectations regarding those new gene and cell therapy products that are now starting to be commercially available. And it's very beautiful to see those types of technology changing people's lives. But of course, a couple of challenges come along, such as how to finance, how to guarantee access of those very expensive technologies to the general population. But my predictions are very obvious. Cell and gene therapies are set to expand, and the challenges are set to be overcome, because that's the way to go. We go forward, right?
We go forward. We go forward. So Dr. Noel, where have you seen cell and gene therapy utilized or applied, and what are your predictions?
Yeah, a little bit like Dr. Cavallo. During my PhD, I did quite a bit of cell work as well, using some HeLa cells, as you mentioned earlier as well. I think the obvious and sexy thing now to talk about is CRISPR, and so in the capabilities of where that could go. I think gene therapy and personalized medicine, we've been talking about it for 20 years or so now. And one of the big challenges was to be able to precisely modify a gene. So we had techniques before. The problem was that we were targeting other places that we didn't want to, and that could cause cancer and cause other problems. And with CRISPR now, it's a legitimate method to be able to be precise in terms of editing, in terms of cutting a gene where we want to cut it, adding stuff that we want to add it, at least from a cell standpoint, cell work standpoint. And so the obvious potential impact is in the single gene diseases. So we talk about cystic fibrosis, sickle cell disease, a lot of those congenital diseases. So those would be the more obvious and first one to be affected. So I think we've talked about personalized medicine for a while. I think in some fields it's been applied more than others. We could think of breast cancer and cancer field in general. A lot of the times now, it's not a one size fits all in terms of therapy, but you get sequence, you get, they determine what you have and then sort of go in for a more personalized therapy. I think that's the way we're going. And then the obvious one would be finding ways to integrate CRISPR in a more outside of the labs in an ethical fashion, obviously. But I think that's the next big breakthrough that I would like to see, at least in the next 10 to 20 years, where we're able to affect some of those, I don't want to say easier disease, but easier, well understood disease processes where it's only a single gene or a simple genetic involvement, and be able to literally cure these folks genetically.
Yeah, it is the future. And I mean, I think all of us are saying the same thing, in that it's coming, it's here. It's going to expand, and there's room for all of us to participate in this, whether it's as consumers, informed consumers, or if it's in the education, research, and development track. So with a few minutes left, I'd like to engage each of you all in a question. Phil, I'd like to start with you.
Sure.
What's the opportunity? Where's the opportunity right now that you would tell a counselor, hey, you have a student that is coming out, here's where they need to go to prepare to get in now?
Come to the Science Center now. I would really say some of the best options, if a counselor has come to me and said, hey, listen, Phil, I have this amazing student, where do I need to direct them? I would say really to have that conversation with that counselor to really begin to understand what that student has interest in. And if that student doesn't know what they want to do, start to make connections with, I mean, I jokingly said it, but make connections with, the Science Center, potentially the Firsthand team, the many kind of mentors and opportunities that exist within the programs that we have under our workforce branch and under our Firsthand branch are pretty plentiful. The other thing, and it was mentioned that Philly has a lot of resources. Sometimes, us Philly folks don't know how to use those resources in the proper way. So one of the things I would say to that counselor is really be able to have that first conversation and then understand where that student is going. If that student doesn't know where they're going, definitely reach out and build networks in the community. Definitely reach out to me if that counselor is real. Definitely connect with me, connect with some of the other scientists that we have as resources so they can at least begin a dialogue. The other big thing, and I'll put the cherry on top with them, folks who look like the students that we serve, that is a huge, huge component. I knew a middle school teacher who essentially at the beginning of the year told their students to draw a scientist, and every student drew a white male in a lab coat. She wanted to change the focus of that to having them being a lab coat. So that's the advice I'd give that counselor.
Very good. And it looks like we've run out of time, so I don't get to give you a gotcha question, Dr. Noel and Dr. Cavallo. But I thank you so much for joining us today. Phil, as always, it is a pleasure. So again, it's Philly Tech Week, from HeLa cells to K-12 education with NeoTechs. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a good one.
Thank you, everyone, so much. Bye-bye.